All right, let's check that. There we go. Okay, now we're up and running. So, for those of you that missed it the first time around, welcome to the Midwest Concussion Clinic monthly lunch and learn for December. The whole goal of today's lunch and learn is to be a Q&A session on concussions. If you have any questions, feel free to hop into our chat here or on YouTube Live. Now that our mics are working, we're up everywhere. So we're going to go in. We're going to talk a little bit about the 12 common concussion questions that I get from patients and their support systems. If you have any questions or anything that you may notice that pops up that you want to know, feel free to chime in, ask the questions. I'll answer them. If I can't get to it during the session today, I'll make a video about it, shoot it over to you to make sure you understand what's going on. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, question number 1. This is the most common one. Obviously, it makes the most sense when people are coming to me looking at concussion recovery. It's the idea of what is a concussion. So when we sit down and talk about concussions, concussions are a traumatic brain injury caused by a direct hit to the head, neck, or body, or a rapid jolting of the head, neck, or body that causes a shearing force to occur inside the brain. A couple things that I didn't say: you don't have to get hit in the head. Okay, just because we have people that come in and say, hey, I didn't get hit in the head, I don't remember getting hit in the head. We see it a lot with car accidents as people are sitting here going, I don't remember hitting my head. Why do I have all of this going on? There doesn't need to be a direct hit to the head to sustain a concussion. The second thing about that is concussions are a traumatic brain injury. Don't call them a bruise. Don't tell them that they're anything else than what they are. They are a traumatic brain injury that directly affects an individual's chemical and neurometabolic performance inside the body. So when we start looking at what a concussion actually is, there doesn't have to be a loss of consciousness. There doesn't have to be any set number of symptoms or any set number of limitations. It's a traumatic brain injury caused by a shearing force that occurs inside the brain. So when we talk about that shearing force, it's a disruption of the electrical signal. That's why it doesn't show up on your common CT scans, X-rays, or MRIs. There is no structural change that we can see with traditional advanced imaging. Now, there are some structural changes that occur at a microscopic level, and some changes that may show up on what's called a SPECT scan or blood flow scans. But they're, if we look at traditional advanced imaging, CT scans, X-rays, and MRIs, nothing is going to show up, which is what makes them a lot more difficult to actually go through a diagnose or prove somebody's had one or talk about kind of when somebody recovers. So concussions are not a bruise. They are a traumatic brain injury caused by a direct hit to the head, neck, or body, or a rapid jolting of the head, neck, or body that causes a shearing force to occur inside the brain itself. The second common question we get is, what actually is post-concussion syndrome? This is where I'm here to tell you that post-concussion syndrome is not something that everybody will develop. It gets thrown around a lot of times in different specialties that, we've had a concussion and now we have symptoms, so all of a sudden you've got post-concussion syndrome. That's not necessarily what it is. Hey, thanks for the comment on my sweater. I absolutely love this sweater too. I appreciate that. But when we talk about what kind of concussions are, or what post-concussion syndrome is, it's concussion symptoms that have lingered for longer than a set amount of time with kids or a set amount of time with adults. That number has changed over the course of the years. Right now, we're set at about 30 days with kids and about 6 weeks with adults. Okay, so when we start looking at what post-concussion syndrome is, it's not something that you've developed, it's not something that somebody has done wrong, and it's not something that will be there for a long time or be there forever. It's something that we'll talk about down the road. But when we start looking at what post-concussion syndrome actually is, it just looks at more towards how long the concussion symptoms have lasted over time. Okay, so when we look at traditional acute concussions versus post-concussion syndrome, don't assume that just because you've had a concussion diagnosis or had an injury that all of a sudden these are going to be long-term effects that are going to hang on for a while, or that you're going to be dealing with symptoms for a long time. There are a pretty good amount of people that do deal with long-term symptoms, but that's not everybody. So you may have had a concussion in the past and you're like, wow, I don't know why Matt makes such a big deal about these concussions. I've never had one, or when I had mine, I got better pretty quickly. That's the frustrating part on my end of things, because everybody's going to present differently. Everybody's going to recover differently. So when we start talking about what post-concussion syndrome truly is, it's just concussion symptoms that have lingered for longer than 30 days in kids and longer than 6 weeks in adults. All right, the third most commonly asked question that we get is, how do I know if I've actually had a concussion? And to be honest with you, that's a really, really good question, because the amount of people that aren't told they've had a concussion, even if they go to to the emergency room or go see their primary care provider, the amount of people that could skate through the initial kind of concussion recovery period without actually being diagnosed with a concussion is really, really high. And a lot of it has to do with, we need a couple things. The first one is we need a mechanism of injury. You don't just wake up with a headache and go, you know what, I have a concussion. We have to have some form of a mechanism of injury. A rapid hit to the body or the neck, a direct hit to the head, a rapid movement of the head, neck, or body that will produce common concussion symptoms. Which, if we start looking at what concussion symptoms are, there's a list of 23 of them that we talk about a lot during your time. If you've ever worked with somebody who deals in concussions, most of the time you'll fill out some form of a post-concussion symptoms checklist, which just has all of those symptoms listed, and we're rating those symptoms on a scale of 0 to 10. But the most common symptoms that people will deal with: headaches, dizziness, nausea, light sensitivity, brain fog, fatigue, disorientation, difficulty with concentrating or processing, and emotional dysregulation. So that's step number one. We need a mechanism of injury that causes concussion symptoms. One of the more challenging aspects of, well, why didn't I get told about this, or why wasn't I diagnosed with a concussion, is concussion symptoms may not present right away. You may have had a car accident and then I was doing fine for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden my symptoms started 48 hours afterwards, 72 hours afterwards, a week afterwards, 2 weeks afterwards. That's the challenge when it comes to brain chemistry, is it takes some time for some people to develop symptoms overall, and they may not remember what their mechanism of injury is. So when we start looking at the checklist for what a concussion, or how do we know if we've had a concussion or not, the first one is mechanism. The second one is symptom presentation. The third one is we need to go through a structured evaluation to look at what may be causing what these symptoms are. Biggest challenge of brain injuries themselves is there is no set standard symptoms. There's no set standard timelines for people. There's no one concussion looks the same for everybody. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So when we look at how we diagnose concussions in our clinic, I use a combination of testing to look at your visual systems, your vestibular system, your emotional regulation. We do a lot of subjective questionnaires to see what symptoms that you're dealing with, how often, how they're affecting your day-to-day life. And then we start looking at, the way those systems work independently and the way those systems work together. So when it comes down to how do you know if you've had a concussion, we've got a mechanism of injury, we've got symptom presentation, and then we have a battery of testing that we can use to trigger symptoms or trigger deficits with somebody trained in concussion management. So if I'm looking at, okay, when do I need to go get seen? When do I need to see somebody? If I've got two or the three of those checklists where I've got a mechanism, if I've got symptoms, that's enough that you need to sit here and figure out who in that healthcare system that you trust, or who that you can go see with a background in concussions to go through that process to get you that formal diagnosis and to rule out potentially other things that might be happening. I get that in my clinic at times. I get people that come in and say, hey, look, Matt, I've got these things going on. I'm not really sure what happened. If there's any mechanism, it may have happened a long time ago. I don't really know what's going on. What do we do at this point? And I'll put them through the evaluation. I'll put them through all of my subjective questionnaires. I'll go through and look at the independent vestibular and visual system evaluation. I'll look at them together, and we'll go through and we'll figure out and rule in and rule out things. If I go through all of my testing and I can't trigger symptoms or I can't find any deficits at all, there's a good chance that it's not a brain injury, and we can just say, okay, let's now look at some of the other things that might be causing it. Metabolic dysfunction, hormone irregularities or dysregulation. We start looking at other causes for symptoms that may be consistent with concussions or brain injuries in general. Okay, so just to kind of sum it up, how do I know if I've had one? We need a mechanism of injury. We need concussion symptoms, which generally consists of headache, dizziness, nausea, neck pain or tension, light sensitivity, visual disruption, emotional regulation, some mental fogginess, and fatigue. Those are the common ones that people will deal with. And then we need a positive visual and vestibular evaluation that's done by a trained healthcare professional. Question number 4 is probably one of the most frequently asked patients as I'm working through the rehab side of things, is when will I get better? The easy question, or the easy answer to that question, I don't know. I have no idea. I can tell you that most concussion symptoms and the neurometabolic cascade that occurs after a concussion generally takes 30 to 60 days to complete. Does that mean that you'll get better in that 30 to 60 day window? Not necessarily. Does that mean it's going to take a minimum of 30 days to get better? Not necessarily. Every brain injury is different. Every brain injury is unique. So when I have a patient that sits down and says, okay, this is my story, this is my evaluation, how long do you think it's going to last? We are using our best estimates to talk to you about how long we think symptoms are going to last based on experience, based on your particular injury history, based on your symptom modifications and your symptom presentation, and what your evaluations look like. When will I get better is one of the more frustrating questions for a patient to hear answered, because the common answer is, I'm making a guess, I don't know. But we're going to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, taking it one step at a time, and moving together in the right direction. And that's really, really challenging for patients to hear. Unfortunately, it's one of those common things that we have to look at when we start talking about concussion recovery, because it's a natural question that everybody will want to know. It's natural for everyone to want to know how long it's going to take to recover and why certain people get better faster and others don't. Those of you tuning in just now over on our TikTok, feel free to jump in, say hi, ask any questions that you might have. These are just the common concussion questions that I get asked during my evaluations and during my time with new patients. Question number 5. How do I know when I'm better? This is one of the harder things for somebody, especially if they've had longer concussion recovery, to kind of understand and to navigate. Is because there's always that sensation of like waiting for that other foot or that other shoe to drop, waiting for something to go wrong, waiting for something bad to happen. So how do I know when I'm better is a very, very complex combination of things. The first one is we don't have any symptoms, right? We're asymptomatic. We're back to our quote unquote baseline. We're back to sitting here and saying, okay, I don't have headaches at rest. I'm not dizzy. I'm not nauseous. I feel like my normal self at rest. That's step number 1. The step number 2 to figure out whether or not somebody has recovered or not is that we need to be able to be asymptomatic during our normal day-to-day routines. Getting up and going to work, getting out into the house to go grocery shopping, going to restaurants for dinner, being around family and friends, going to church. We need to make sure that we're able to do those things without spiking symptoms, without getting headaches or dizziness or lightheadedness or nausea. That's step number 2. So we're healthy at rest, we're asymptomatic at rest, we're asymptomatic during normal activities. And then step number 3 is we need to be asymptomatic during complex visual and vestibular activities. The easiest way to describe that is working out, going out and running and jumping, putting you through a complex visual and vestibular evaluation with a trained professional, making sure that we can go through our day-to-day movements at a speed that's consistent with our day-to-day norms. If you're 84 years old and you're struggling to walk, I'm not going to say, hey, we got to make sure that you can run on a treadmill before you're back to normal. That's not realistic. If you can go through your normal day-to-day function and we can make sure that we're not modifying activities, whether consciously or unconsciously, not modifying our activity levels at all, we know that we've established a healthy brain or a recovered brain when it comes to traumatic brain injuries, post-concussion syndrome. So how do I know when I get better? It's a multi-step process. First of all, you have to feel like you're your normal self. A lot of times with patients, that's hard. I don't remember what normal feels like. I've been dealing with this for so long. I don't feel good. I don't understand where I used to be versus where I'm at now. But we need to feel like subjectively we feel like we're our normal self. Second is we need to be able to feel comfortable at rest. We need to feel comfortable sitting in our calm environments, controlling stimulus, doing one thing at a time. Step number 3 is we need to be able to be comfortable in our normal day-to-day routines, going to work like normal, coming home and going out to family dinners, going around friends, going to basketball games or sporting events, being around people without getting symptomatic. And then the third one is, the fourth step in this process is we need to be able to do things at a complex visual and vestibular demand. We need to be able to move from one activity to the next without modifying activities, without producing symptoms or any limitations to our activity levels based on concussion symptoms. How do I know when I get better? There's always going to be that subjective kind of concern when you're starting to stack good days on top of each other on when does that bad day happen? And I'm here to tell you, when we're stacking good days on top of each other, don't be afraid to do activities because that's how we test, that's how we check to see if somebody's actually healed or recovered, is we need to go through kind of a guess and check to get you back to your normal day-to-day routines. Question number 6 that I get asked a lot is, how do we actually treat concussions? Now, for some of you that are new to this process or just finding me going through social media trying to figure out why a guy rocking a sweet dinosaur sweater is talking to you about brain injuries, you may not know that concussions are a treatable injury. We can actually rehab concussions to make sure that the deficits that present after the injury itself don't cause long-term problems or don't cause long-term symptoms that might alter somebody's day-to-day activities or change somebody's life because they're avoiding certain activities. Concussions are treatable. We don't just sit you in a dark room in a corner anymore and say, hey man, good luck, you'll get better eventually. And then when you don't get better, we pull you back out and say, yeah, well, 2 more weeks, go back in and just wait. We don't do that anymore. Their concussions are a treatable injury, and we treat them with a combination of focusing on visual deficits. So we go through a complex and thorough evaluation of the oculomotor system, the way the eyes move independently, the way they track in and out, the way they change depths in perception, the way they follow objects moving through space. We treat your vestibular system, so the inner ear fluid, that the whole goal of that vestibular system is to keep the brain upright and keep our brain over top of the center of gravity of our body. So we look at the way the head moves, we look at the way the bodies move, we look at the way the head and the bodies move together in the same direction, in opposite directions, and we need to make sure that we're addressing any deficits that present into those individual systems. And then we need to assess how those systems work together. So then we can start treating the dysfunction. Think about it. One of the most complex reflexes that the brain does is what's called the vestibulo-ocular reflex. It's your ability to keep your environment in check while you're moving through space, while your head's moving and while your body's moving. We need to be able to do the component pieces of that vestibulo-ocular reflex without deficits or without spiking symptoms. So if I have somebody who struggles with object horizontal tracking, they're struggling moving their eyes side to side while keeping their eyes focused on a target, I need to make sure that they can do that, because if they can't track side to side without getting dizzy or nauseous or without losing that object, they're not going to be able to move their head side to side without the environment moving or going blurry. So we have to identify the deficits first, and then we do a combination of eye movements and body movement exercises to correct those deficits. That's not the only way we treat concussions, though. Not everybody is going to present with a visual and vestibular dysfunction or a visual and vestibular phenotype of their concussion. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. So if we only focused on the visual system or we only focused on the vestibular system, not everybody would get better. We'd have a majority of people that get better, but not everybody. So we have to look at the visual and vestibular system. We have to look at cervicogenic symptoms and cervicogenic presentation. Upper cervical tension, neck dysfunction, muscle and tension imbalances and strength imbalances and ligament instability. We need to be able to keep the head upright, and we need to make sure that all of the postural muscles that are holding our head and neck in an upright position are strong enough and have enough endurance to work without causing error signals or without sending headaches to the body as a protection mechanism for itself. So we have to treat the visual vestibular system. We have to treat the cervicogenic system. After that, we have to focus on the neurometabolic system. We look at hormone imbalances. We look at dietary changes. We look at energy productions. And we look at making sure that the body gets the necessary stuff that it needs to fuel itself to go through the healing process. Food is energy to the body. We need to make sure that we're getting food in. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to brain injuries is a lot of times there's nausea and vomiting that's associated with them. If I have somebody who's nauseous and vomiting every time that they eat, the likelihood that they're getting the adequate fuel that the brain needs to heal goes down. So we have to figure out how we can address the nausea and vomiting side of things to ensure that we're getting the proper nutrition in, making sure that we're getting the proper hydration, the proper nutritions, the proper supplements in, and then making sure that we're prioritizing our sleep. So when it looks at how do we treat concussions overall, we have to treat the cervical spine, so we have to treat the neck muscle and imbalance and tension. We have to treat the visual and vestibular systems and how they function together. We have to treat the neurometabolic system and the hormone cycles. We have to make sure that we're treating everything in terms of proper supplementation, vitamins, sleep regulation, making sure that we're getting everything that we need to give the fuel brain to heal. And the last thing that we need to focus on throughout the entirety of the process, and it's something that I talk on a lot on our social media accounts in every presentation that I give, is we have to address the mental health side of concussion recovery. Everybody's going to be a little bit different. The longer you don't feel good, the harder it is to remember what good feels like. So when we start talking about concussions, yeah, we need to treat the physical aspect of things, but we also need to focus on the mental health side of things. The only two major treatments that have withstood the test of time through the entirety of our life cycle and our research cycle is meditation and acupuncture. If we start looking at those two things, it's a positive mindset, and it's the way to kind of keep all of us centered and all of us focused on the same goal. So when we're looking at concussion recovery and how we treat concussions, we identify the deficits in the cervical system, the vestibular system, and the visual system. We have to treat the memory, we have to treat the cognitive system, and a lot of that has to do with ensuring that we have the energy for the brain to function the way that it's supposed to through proper diet, nutrition, sleep, and supplementation. And then we have to treat the mental health and make sure that everybody is on the same page when it comes to establishing a routine or establishing what the brain needs to properly recover. Question number 7, do I need to stop playing sports? The answer to that will vary based on every single person that we treat that comes in as an athlete. So when we start talking about do I need to avoid my sports or do I need to stop playing sports in general, this is a very, very individualized conversation that we have with athletes. And I will tell any athlete that has that question or concern, or that I have that concern, let's focus on getting you better first, and then we can have the conversations about the future. Because if we're sitting here saying, all right, I've got an athlete that's only played football their entire lives who's still dead set on going to the NFL, and we have to have that conversation of, hey, your brain's not healthy enough to do this long term. If I take away that dream and then start trying to talk about mental health and getting better and focusing on recovering, that's two contradicting things that will headbutt each other. We need to make sure that we're focusing on controlling what we can control and recover first before we start having those discussions. But eventually those discussions need to happen. So when we look at somebody who we may be talking about, hey, do I need to stop playing sports, or do I need to change my modification, change my activity modification, or avoid certain activities, we have to break it down into two things: risk, reward. It has to, the risk of brain injury, the risk of long-term or permanent damage needs to be worth the reward. If I have somebody who's playing in a small Division III school and this is their 10th concussion, and they're like, hey, do I need to stop playing soccer? And it's like, well, the likelihood that somebody goes from a Division III school to the World Cup is not necessarily really high. It doesn't mean that it's not there. It doesn't mean that it may not be their goal to do that, but is the risk of not being able to remember who you are at 40 years old worth the potential of getting out of that Division III soccer world into the World Cup at less than 1/2%? So we start looking at what the risk versus reward is for that individual athlete, or that individual that's trying to make those modifications to their day-to-day routines or their activity levels, saying, hey, look, I have a brain injury history. It may not be worth me continuing on with my sport. Now, if you've had one concussion, recovery goes really quickly. You've had two concussions, recovery goes really quickly. I make the joke that you don't want to collect concussions like baseball cards. But at the same time, if you're getting a long time in between, you've had a couple injuries, but there's no lingering effects, we've made full recoveries, and your sport demand isn't that high, we start looking at, do you need to stop playing sports? No. There's a lot of really good benefits that come from playing sports. Are they trying to change a lot of sports now to make the rules look a little bit different to help reflect brain health for those less than 1/2% that don't, that make it to the NFL? They're trying to make that healthier for them? Yeah. Is it trying to help protect all brains of everybody that's participating by making it illegal to head the ball before a certain age, trying to institute tackle football at a later date, trying to make all of these modifications to ensure that we're limiting the exposure to brain injuries that we get? Yes, that is things that are all happening right now to make sports healthier. So very, very rarely do we actually have that conversation with patients that, hey, look, maybe it's time for you to hang it up. It's something that I want you to get back to doing the activities that you love, but I also want to make sure that when you're 40 years old and you want to go pick up your kids from school, that you remember who your kids are, not because you wanted to go out and win a high school sectional championship. Okay, so do you need to stop playing sports is a loaded question with an answer that we don't take lightly, that I will sit down and talk about every angle that we can in the hopes of maybe we make an informed decision based on injury history and based on how long symptoms last and what lingering symptoms we might have. Question number 8. This one kind of goes in touch and tied back to the whole, how long will it take me to recover? How long is this going to last? How do I tell if I'm better? Are concussion symptoms or post-concussion symptoms permanent? The answer is no, they are not. Everybody can heal from a post-concussion syndrome or an acute concussion. The challenge with a lot of people that you see that are maybe floating around with long-term deficits or things that may, completely derail life is that generally those people, they didn't get the treatment that they needed early on, and it's harder to bounce back out of it. That doesn't mean that we don't have people floating around with persistent post-concussion symptoms or post-concussion syndrome that go through and have lingering effects. Concussions may not be life-threatening, but they are life-altering to some people. They have to modify activities. Are those people that are having those long-term effects and dealing with things for years doing something wrong? Not necessarily. But it's also something that we may not be dealing with acute post-concussion syndrome or post-concussion symptoms. We might be dealing with a history of migraines or a history of, of an autonomic disorder such as MS or dysautonomia, POTS syndrome, dysregulation for the heart rate and blood pressure syndrome. It's not necessarily those people that are dealing with symptoms for a long time or forever. They may not be only dealing with persisting post-concussion syndrome or post-concussion symptoms. When we start looking at, are my symptoms permanent? If we have the proper rehabilitation, we find out what's actually causing the deficits, and we treat the dysfunction and not the symptoms, the answer is no. They are not permanent. But one of the challenges is we have to go through that evaluation. We have to get the proper assessment to figure out what those deficits truly are. And we need to ensure that we're assessing and treating the deficits, not putting Band-Aids on symptoms. So for those of you that are out there that are struggling, you've been dealing with this for a long time, and you're like, I don't know where the light at the end of the tunnel is. I don't know how to get through this. Keep in mind that concussion symptoms, persistent post-concussion symptoms, post-concussion syndrome, they are not forever, but we have to go through and we have to ensure that the deficits or the symptoms that we're getting, we're treating the dysfunction and not the symptoms themselves. Question number 9, why am I tired all the time? Now, this is strictly on the post-concussion syndrome patients. This is strictly on acute concussions. Not all of us like myself who are really bad at sleeping and we live on caffeine, okay? When we start looking at why am I so tired all the time when dealing with a concussion, the answer is relatively easy. Concussions are what are considered an energy crisis in the body. What that means is the brain has actually decreased energy production while it's trying to heal. When the brain gets hurt, it will physically stop its energy production for a short amount of time. And then as the brain heals, it will increase its energy production and start to get back to a normal level. During that time, the brain actually has less energy available to it and is demanding more energy as it's healing. So not only is it not producing as much energy, it's utilizing more than we have. So the body will burn through sugar stores or glucose stores to give you that energy in demand when it needs it. Well, if we deplete those stores, we feel run down. When we start talking with all of my concussion patients, when it comes to the fatigue side of things, it is the constant throughout concussion recovery. Days where you feel good, you're tired. Days where you don't feel good, you're really tired. There may be times where all you want to do is sleep and you can't sleep. And there may be other times where I slept all day and I could go back to sleep and sleep some more. Concussions are an energy crisis in the body, and as the brain heals, it will get back to its normal energy production. For those people that are engaging in physical activity and you feel winded and out of shape, you are not out of cardiovascular shape. It doesn't have anything to do with the traditional cardiovascular endurance. It has a lot to do with the dysregulation of the heart rate and blood pressure syndrome, and the not having the required energy to make those changes or the required hormones to make those changes efficiently. And generally speaking, it's a lack of efficiency in the body during concussion recovery. So when we start looking big picture, concussions are an energy crisis that occurs inside the body, and over time that energy system will regulate itself back out. But for most part, that's why most people feel tired. Now, to give you an easier digested answer to why you feel tired all the time, think about you're standing in waist-deep mud and you're trying to walk. If you try to walk through waist-deep mud, you're going to get tired really quickly. If you do the same walking through water, it's easier. If you do the same walking on land, it's easier. If you're walking downhill, it's easier and easier and easier. The less you have pushing back against you, the easier for you to move forward. So when we start looking at brain injuries, the more things that are stacked against you, the more symptoms that we're dealing with, the more dysfunction we're dealing with, the more the energy demand goes up, the less energy we have available, and the more fatigued that we truly feel. So why are you tired all the time? It's because concussions are an energy crisis inside the body that will recover over time. The 10th question that I get a lot is, how can I help somebody with a concussion? This is one of my things that I talk about with every single person who will listen. I am put on this world to help people. That's who I am as a person. I'm going to hold a door for you. I'm going to take things back from you. I'm going to carry stuff in for you. If there's something that I can do to help somebody make their day better than my day is, I'm doing what I am supposed to do in life. When it comes down to concussions, that's why I kind of navigated towards the brain injury side of things for a career and a passion, because there are a population that's not helped a lot or not continually or consistently helped during their day-to-day routines. They get help a lot early on, but as we go through that fatigue of not being able to see things, not understanding, not remembering that they're dealing with things, generally their support systems will start to fall or lack a little bit more. So when I have that question that's brought up, I get a family member, I get a friend or an employer that's like, okay, how can I help somebody? The first thing is be there. Being there for somebody that's dealing with concussion recovery doesn't necessarily mean being around all the time. Doesn't necessarily mean bugging them, asking them every day, man, how you doing? How you doing? You feeling okay? You don't look good today. How you doing? Oh man, you look great. I'm so proud of you. You did that. Being there for somebody is just letting them know that, hey, if you need my help, I'm here. Helping them with day-to-day routines, helping them with daily chores without them having to sit down and ask, without expecting anything in return, is really, really hard for people to understand early on. But just because somebody didn't thank you doesn't mean they aren't appreciative of that help that you're getting. So the first thing that I talk about with people that are trying to get help is, number one, just be there. The second thing that you can do to help is understand that there's going to be fluctuations day to day. Just because they felt good yesterday and did a lot yesterday doesn't mean they have the same capacity to do activities today. Understanding that there are going to be peaks and valleys during their recovery and helping them during those down times, remember that good things do happen and good times do happen. So it goes hand in hand. If you're there, you see those ups and downs and you can help prepare for them. You can help explain to people that, hey, look, Sarah may not want to come out tonight just because she doesn't feel good. It has nothing to do with the fact that she doesn't want to hang out with you. She doesn't feel good today. Or, hey, we're going to leave now because I'm starting to see something in my significant other that's dealing with a concussion that I don't want them to have to go through that explanation or feeling bad because they had to leave a family get-together or a dinner. So being there for somebody and understanding that those ebbs and flows, those ups and downs are going to happen. And then the third easy one, the free one, stay positive. It's really dark at times. Concussions, brain injuries, traumatic brain injuries, everything that deals with brain health, chronic fatigue, chronic illness, all of those things can feel very isolating to the person that's going through them. When we start looking at it, it's people don't understand. I don't have the energy to tell people I'm not feeling good. I get tired of saying the same things over and over again, or I don't know how to relay how I feel. All of those things will make people stop telling people how they feel. It'll make that person turn inward and start to isolate themselves from everybody around. So when we start looking at that isolation that can happen, being there for somebody, understanding that that ebb and flow may happen, and ensuring that we can stay positive and be a positive reinforcement during this time. If you have somebody that's down on themselves about physical presentation or appearance, man, I look bad today, compliment them. Hey, your hair looks good. You look good. You're smiling a lot today. I love it. Being a positive, uplifting influence and a consistent positive reminder that, hey, just because you didn't do what you wanted to do today doesn't mean that you didn't do 10 things that you weren't able to do a month ago. We had a better day today. Your bad day today is better than your good day was 6 weeks ago. Being a constant positive influence on somebody who's struggling through concussion recovery can mean the world to them. Even if they don't know how to repay you or don't know how to show it in time, just know it will make the world a difference to them in the long run. So how can we help somebody with a concussion? Again, being present. Being present doesn't necessarily mean that you're there all the time, but knowing that they can reach out to you if they need to, checking in on them, making sure that they're handling things okay. The second one is that we need to make sure that we're able to see those ebbs and flows, see those up and downs, and understand that it's not a personal thing that's going on. That up and down during brain injury recovery is a very real neurometabolic thing that's happening, and it's causing issues with everything symptom-wise, hormone regulation, conversation, energy, mood, all of the above. those ups and downs happen and understanding that they do happen. And then finally, maintaining a consistent and positive presence in their life can mean the world of difference to somebody in concussion or post-traumatic brain injury recovery. Question number 11 is, why don't people understand what I'm going through? And the easiest answer that I tell patients all the time is, did you understand what you were going through before you started going through it? No. The people around you may not have the same understanding or same experience. They may have never had a concussion before, or never been dealing with post-concussion syndrome or persistent post-concussion symptoms. They may have never seen anything like this before. So not only are they trying to help you go through it, they're trying to learn and understand what's actually happening. Now, in a perfect world, we have somebody who's invested and listens and pays attention and learns and picks up on those things. But on the real world, brain injuries and concussions are a very, very complex thing to understand. If I have somebody who's now taking over a gender role or taking over a relationship role that they're not used to, trying to help navigate a complex injury, trying to make sure everything in a household or everything in a relationship stays put together and kind of and doesn't lose or doesn't fall through the cracks. We have all of that all going on at the same time. Not everybody's going to understand or have the capacity to understand what you're going through. The easiest way for getting somebody to understand is to sit down with them and discuss expectations, is for you to tell them as much as you can how you're feeling and what you're feeling, what you need help with, and how they can help. Open communication and open dialogue is the key to life. One of the challenges post-brain injury is we struggle with communication. So sitting down as best we can, trying to outline what we need from a support system, what we need for that individual going through recovery, and how we can make sure that those roles are getting and those needs are getting fulfilled. Just because people don't understand or don't act the way that you expect them to, doesn't necessarily mean they're doing it to spite you. They may not understand what's going on. So it's a complex neurometabolic injury, a complex neuro condition that will ebb and flow and change. People become experts in a condition that they have or that they've navigated or been through. It is really challenging for people that have never heard of it, never have it, or their only understanding of concussions comes from professional sports where it seems like they're better in 2 or 3 days. That's something that's really challenging for people to understand. Is not everybody will understand what you're going through, and it's kind of one of those things that it will require constant communication to ensure that people are reminded of what's going on and how we can continue to help them moving forward. And finally, question number 12. This is something that I get generally at the end of patients that I've been dealing with that we're doing those kind of final goodbyes where I make a joke that I'm a figment of your imagination. I never want to see you again. I want you to remember and go through life and not sit down and go, man, I wonder what Matt's doing. I want to come into life, into people's lives, be there when they need them, help them out, and say, all right, cool. I hope I never see you again. I want you back on a life, and I want you back and needing things, and everything's great. I become a figment of your imagination that at some point down the road, you're going to be sitting in your chair going, man, what a good life. And I have nothing to do with that memory. So when we sit down and we're having those final conversations, I get this a lot is, why did it take so long to learn all of this? Why did it take so long to find you? Why did it take so long to work with somebody who understands? And this question answer is tied back into the last one. Not everybody understands what concussions are or what traumatic brain injuries are. The research is constantly changing. Our understanding is constantly changing. And unless they're staying up to date on it, they may not have the most accurate information that they have available to them. So when it takes so long to hear the education side, is we just sat down and had a conversation for 45 minutes where we talked about brain injuries and headache location and kind of what happens with the mechanism of injury and their responses to it. We didn't get into the complexities of the relationship changing or the dynamics changing or losing a job or life-altering decisions that need to be made. We didn't get into that. We sat down and said, all right, cool. We're going to talk about headache presentation, symptom presentation, and mechanism. If we sit down and sit here and say, all right, how do I bottle up 6 weeks worth of treatment or 9 weeks worth of treatment and say, cool, I want everybody to know this right now. That's not realistic. One of my jokes that I make with every patient that I interact with is nobody cares about concussions until something happens. When you see me pop up on social media, when I'm on TikTok Live, people might stick around for the sweater. People might stick around because I'm, kind of a goofy guy talking a lot with my hands. But eventually you're going to scroll on because unless it resonates with you, people don't stick around. they're sitting here going, you know what, I've had a concussion, or that won't happen to me, or I don't play football, so I can't get a concussion. Nobody wakes up and goes, you know what, I want to learn everything I can about concussions today. That's not realistically something that happens. So when we sit down and start, hey, how did I hear about this, or why did it take so long? The reason I do these kind of presentations, and the reason I go out and do a lot of free webinars and my social media accounts and running all of this stuff, is that if something happens, I want them to remember the logo. I want them to remember the dinosaur sweater that's talking to them on TikTok. I want to make sure that they understand that just because you didn't need that information when you saw it the first time, that it's not there and available to you. So when we start talking about why didn't people hear about this, why didn't patients hear about it, it all boils back to the fact that nobody cares about concussions until something goes wrong. And then when something goes wrong, there are a lot of resources that are out there willing to help you. Finding that right person, finding the person that works the best for you, and making sure that you're staying in constant communication with that person is key to any traumatic brain injury recovery. I appreciate anybody that tuned in throughout this process. If you want to learn more about the Midwest Concussion Clinic, you want to learn more about traumatic brain injuries or concussions in general, you can follow me on all of our major social media platforms at MW Concussion on X, Facebook, Twitter. We've got our YouTube channels that are set up, Instagram and LinkedIn. I'm there on all of them. If you've missed out on the Midwest Concussion Clinic Christmas cartoon, it's happening every day throughout the Christmas season, with a culmination on Christmas Eve of Buddy trying to navigate through his concussion recovery and trying to navigate the big city while he tries to find my friend who's there to help him through his concussion recovery and help get him back to his normal routines. For those of you that are interested in these type of webinars, I host a free webinar every third Wednesday of the month at noon Eastern on TikTok and YouTube Live, where I go through and talk about a different topic. So if you've missed out on them, I think this is number 8 or 9 now. So we've got a bunch of them that are back on there that you can learn. All of it gets clipped down into our social medias. And I will tell you this, I am here to help people. If you've got a question, feel free to DM it to me. The perks of a small business: that social media, that phone call, that email comes directly to the person who's making the decisions, correctly to the person who's answering the questions. There's nothing that goes through. It has to go through different channels. I am employee one of one, that if you got a question, I want you to come out and ask it. I'll answer it for you, because if you have that question, the likelihood that somebody else has that question also. Again, thanks to everybody for tuning in. My name is Matt. I'm the owner of the Midwest Concussion Clinic. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays to everybody out there, and I hope I never have to meet any of you. Take care.